Thanks for watching. It's that one guy in Sunday school. Joshua 1 through 8 this week was what we kind of got to read for the church's Come Follow Me lessons. And so I studied it this past week, and on initial viewing, I feel like God's talking to the individual and the group at the same time. So Joshua is the successor to Moses, and as such, he has beyond big shoes to fill. He's got, as his predecessor, the most famous prophet in history up to this point and maybe since. And so he's understandably, I think safe to assume, probably quite anxious about how he's going to handle this scenario. And so the book of Joshua begins with God actually talking to Joshua and trying to comfort him and assure him that things will go well. He starts with a promise in Joshua 1:3 that every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, I will give unto you, as I said to Moses. So he's assuring him he's going to follow in the path of Moses and complete the mission. Verse 5, he is trying to instill confidence into Joshua. He says, there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. And after that, you start getting the really famous words of be strong and of a good courage. So he's playing the long game. He's playing, three-dimensional chess with the Israelites. But at the same time, he's concerned about Joshua as an individual, which I think is very important to remember because we in our lives, we might feel like we have a challenging task going on. We might feel like we've got big shoes to fill. We may be in a time of distress, and you might say, God cares so much more about everybody else than about me right now. And it's just not true. And this is a great example of how God will show his care and love to every individual. If he gives you a task, he will provide you with the strength to accomplish it. The famous saying goes in the church, if he puts you to it, he'll push you through it. But that was just the first thing I kind of caught notice. There's also some other famous passages in here. For instance, Joshua 1:8, which says, the book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make the way prosperous, and then shalt thou have good success. And that is a key passage to remember in our daily lives. But it's interesting that it also gets fulfilled here on a broad scale in these passages today. Moving on from Joshua 1, you start getting stories of conquest. And to be fully fair and open, I'm very troubled when I read these chapters because I'm seeing that God is commanding the Israelites to kill men, women, and children. And it's hard to read because I realize these are real people here that were dying. And so I've been trying to reconcile, how does this all work? How can God be a loving God who sends his son to die for us and yet tell people to kill other people on such a massive scale? I mean, this wasn't like a Nephi kills Laban because he absolutely has to. This is, we're going to slaughter entire cities. So while I was pondering that this week, it occurred to me the instances in which God commanded violence were very narrow, and the Israelites didn't get, as I see it, a blank check to kill anyone who hated their God. It was, God had to specifically say, go after this and this, whereas the overarching rule is to love our neighbor as ourselves. So, for instance, I guess the better way to say it is love is the rule, violence is the exception, as far as I can tell. And we get some interesting things happen during these conquests. One initial thought I had is that in order to condemn others for wickedness, which the Israelites were doing, they had to be completely pure. They could not look down on others without being completely righteous themselves. And God really reinforced this in them, that they had to be better. And that's why I said Joshua 1:8 circles back around in these in these passages, because it says in Joshua 1:8, the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, so that you can observe to do all that's written therein, and then you will make your way prosperous and have good success. So, skipping ahead to chapter 5, I believe. No, make that 7. Read about Israel attacking the city of Ai. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but they did not get an explicit instruction from God to do so. So they were told, you're going to take out Jericho, and they did. And we'll come back to that. But when it came to Ai, it seems, based on the text of the Bible, that they kind of just went ahead and assumed they were supposed to do it. And so they attacked, and they lost. In fact, they were beat back and embarrassed, to the point that the Israelites were kind of panicking, like, oh my goodness, we've been set back. Everyone's going to feel confident in coming and attacking us now. And the reason is because they were not completely pure themselves. God explained the whole thing in Joshua 7:11. Says, Israel has sinned. They've also transgressed my covenant, which I have commanded them. They have even taken the accursed thing, and they have stolen. So upon investigation, they found out that there had been a member of the Israelite army who had stolen stuff from Jericho. And God had said, nobody takes any possessions from Jericho. This is all going to go to the Lord. The people were to be slain. But the Israelite soldiers were not supposed to profit from this in any way. One of them decided he was going to pocket a little bit of gold and maybe a couple other things. Hard to resist. And because there was that wickedness, God did not support them in their attack on Ai. They were beat back. And so in our lives today, at this moment, we do not live in a time where God is calling on any kind of violence, at least none that I've heard of. But we need to interact with people who are not faithful. And it's important to remember the story in that we have no right to condemn when we are not completely pure ourselves, and we never are. That's why we let God do the judging, let God do the condemning, is the better way I like to think of it. We can still make righteous, judgments, say, hey, what they're doing is not right, but we are not on the moral high ground to condemn anyone else. Only Jesus and the Father are on that high ground. But cutting back to Jericho, as I said, we would get back to that. There's an interesting story of how God can show his love and mercy to any individual. So they were supposed to take out all of Jericho, and they did, with the exception of one family, Rahab, the harlot, the prostitute. So we begin with the story of Joshua sending out spies to look into Jericho, see what the defenses were, and plan their attack, I suppose. Interesting coincidence, because Joshua himself had been a spy many years before. But anyway, he's too old for this now, I guess. So he's sending out spies, and they stay in Jericho. And this prostitute named Rahab lets them stay in her house. And she covers for them when the men of Jericho become aware that there's spies. They come looking for them, want to kill them, understandably. And Rahab lies to protect them, and in exchange for a promise from his Israelite spies that when they come and take Jericho, they will leave her alive and her family. And that's exactly what happens. The spies are protected. The Israelites do come in and they take out Jericho, and they're very careful to leave Rahab and her family alive. And I wondered this week, out of anybody in Jericho, why Rahab? And to be truthful, I don't have all the answers, but what I'm kind of thinking is God looks on the heart, not on the actions. He's not so much interested in your life story, what the events you did, as in your life's motivations, why you did what you did. And it must be somehow that Rahab had a heart of gold, I guess. Because despite the fact that her profession, or her job, if you want to call it that, was not a good one, prostitution's never a good thing to be involved in, Evidently, at some part in her heart, there was faith in God, faith in the God of Israel, and a hope for mercy. And because that, she was able to beg God indirectly through the Israelites for mercy, and that was extended. And I don't know I suppose what I'm implicitly saying is that everyone else in Jericho wasn't like that, and maybe that's true. I'm not sure, but it's important to think about that. Rahab can be any one of us. We are all worthy of hell. We are sinners that without mercy will go up in hell. We'll be dead spiritually in the same way that Jericho was dead physically. And despite the fact that we may have made so many mistakes, that we may have chosen really bad things to do our lives with, God can still wants to show mercy, and if we reach out, it will be extended. If a prostitute in the wicked of wickedest cities can be worthy of mercy, I think safe to say anyone can be. Now I've got a few minutes left. Other insights I may have come up with. This is a tricky one if you're in the podcasting business like me, but you can't get cocky or overly confident in yourself or presumptuous in what you're doing. We always have to retain humility. And that was a lesson that the Israelites learned the hard way in these chapters. Going back to that attack on Ai, they went in overconfident. They were fresh off of a massive military victory in Jericho, in which it appears that they lost no one while taking out a huge walled city. They had the exact opposite happen to them on Ai. So when Joshua sent basically spies out to Ai like he had to Jericho, they came back and they said we're in Joshua 7 verse 3. They returned to Joshua and said, "Let not all the people go up, but let 2 or 3,000 men go up and smite Ai, and make not all the people labor thither, for there are not but a few." Small city, little town, and they figured we'll just go in, handle it ourselves, easy, don't even send the whole army. And again, this is where there's no evidence that they prayed to God about this attack. They just kind of went ahead and did it. They got their rear ends kicked. They had a massive setback, and it's kind of where we should be. And I'm horrible about this, but I want to get better at it. We should be praying to God for guidance on all the decisions we make. Okay, maybe not like what cereal to eat, but any kind of event you want to have happen in your life, we should include God in. He should be the first person we ask advice from. We shouldn't just go to our friends and get their opinion and then go with it. That's what Joshua did. He was a great guy, but he made a mistake here, it seems. He went in just on the advice of people he trusted. And there was things he didn't know that God knew. God knew the Israelites weren't pure and he wasn't going to back them up. If Joshua had asked, maybe he would have gotten that memo a little earlier rather than waiting to get embarrassed. And because of that, in Joshua 7:6, he had to rend his clothes, tore his clothes open, fell face down before the ark of God all day long, along with all the other elders of Israel. And they were putting dust on their heads, saying, "Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over Jordan to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? O Lord, what shall I say when Israel turneth their backs before their enemies? All the inhabitants of the land shall hear of it, shall surround us and cut off our name. What wilt thou do?" That's, forgive me for summarizing there, but God talks back and says, where I quoted earlier, Israel has sinned. They've transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. They've taken the accursed thing. That was Achan, the soldier who had taking a little bit of the spoils from Jericho. So we shouldn't rely on our own judgment too much. It harkens back to Proverbs, maybe I should say forward, because at this point Proverbs hadn't been written yet, but Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Well, that's all I got from Joshua 1 through 8. Chapters 23 and 24 were also involved in the Come Follow Me for this week, but I haven't gotten that far yet. So maybe I can post something next week about that. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, share your insights you may have in the comments. I'd love to read them. Have a great week.